Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Who watched the last panel here, please? We watched the last panel here. Our way here for the conversation is a little different. We were talking about advertising and brand, but the last panel talked about some important points for this conversation here. For example, good content, for example, algorithms, communities, and when we talk about fake news or disinformation. I think our way is different here, but the relationship with this panel is very, very strong. So we have here the root consumer company, PepsiCo, who will talk about advertising way to make it, we use generative AI. We have McKinsey. McKinsey, I love the McKinsey research, very, very interesting research around the world. When we talk about the C-level strategy, who invests in generative AI, who not invest in generative AI. And audio, we can see the strategy for the media, and the media look at this view for generative AI. Kate, I will start with you. For the PepsiCo, a road company for consumers, what is the big challenge when we talk about generative AI? How you use generative AI? Or another question, how the generative AI change your way to looking for the investments in content and marketing?
Yeah, so we've been using AI for many years. I mean, we talk about Gen AI as this brand new tool, but AI has been around, and we've been using it to help optimize our advertising and marketing investments for years across all of our campaigns, whether it comes to creative pre-testing to understand how our creative is going to perform in the marketplace so that we can optimize it before it goes live, or where it's using tools to help us understand how our media investment is performing and doing some real-time optimization to just make sure that we're maximizing any investment that we have. It's been a critical tool in our arsenal for many years. When we talk about Gen AI, I think that's something that we're taking a bit more of a cautious and conservative approach to. We've formed up a responsible AI council that helps us really survey and assess all of the platforms that we look to partner with before really going live on anything. And through that, we've started initiating a few pilots, a few POCs to really prove out the value, because there are a number of use cases that we see. And we are excited to see how it can help us be more personalized to drive better connections to our consumers, because ultimately, what we're trying to do is build those meaningful connections on a one-to-one basis that we can deliver to our audience that are going to really make it resonate with them so that they really want to drive that brand love and brand equity.
Better connections with the consumers. Absolutely. Here. What is the challenge for the humanize this relationship? When you talk about better connections, use Gen AI, what is the big challenge for becoming more humanized this conversation, for example?
I would say one of the bigger challenges that we have is the fact that you need to have some governance and some control over it. And I think that there is concern that is it staying true to the guardrails, to the guidelines? Really releasing it at this point is something that, from a brand safety, from an ethical perspective, we're not ready to just unleash yet. So those are things that we're very mindful of before we put anything into market, is making sure that it's staying true to the brand voice, the brand tone, the brand identity, who the audience is, to make sure that we're not putting anything out there that potentially could harm the brand reputation.
Jack, when I read some playbooks or research from McKinsey, the playbooks talk about governance, guidelines. So the question here is, how did all this conversation about the Gen AI change the view for the C-level, for the leadership from markets? How changed all this conversation?
Yeah, so let's take a step back and just talk stats, because the stats are somewhat staggering. The stats say that 125% annual growth of Gen AI-related marketing, which would potentially unlock $1.2 trillion of value. I mean, that's staggering alone. And so as a CMO or as at the C-suite, the question really is, what is that step change function in terms of how I can use Gen AI for my business? And, you know, Kate kind of touched on it. There's everything from personalization, customer engagement, stickiness, content creation, real-time analytics to really understand the success of your campaign, full campaign lifecycle management. Then there's the productivity side. Some of the stats we're seeing, again, is that Gen AI customer interactions over the next 5 to 10 years, 60%, removing 60% of the manual interaction. That again also is just amazing. And then there's the customer insights and analytics. And again, Kate touched on that. Using those real time for segmentation, micro segmentation, real personalization. And then I think the final one relates to talent. With all of this that's going on, how do you tap in and make sure you have the right talent? The talent is using it with ethics, guardrails, all of the things that Kate touched on, but how do we unlock talent in a whole new way for that? So those are just some key areas.
It's important to, the word here, guideline and compliance, is very important, including when we talk about investments, when we talk about the strategy view, and when we talk about the PepsiCo. It's a very, very big company. Wilfrid, now we can talk about, you are in two very important ecosystems, games and audio, and you put very ads and technology here. Gen AI is not a new subject for you, yeah?
Yeah, so at Audiomob, at Audiomob, basically what we're doing is, as you said, providing audio advertising in mobile games and apps. And the bridge might not be kind of obvious to a lot of people, but when you have 3 billion people playing these mobile games, and you have 45% of the users being female, and you have an age demographic that follows the population demographic, it kind of makes a lot of sense why a brand would want to use audio. But like you said, when it comes to audio, radio has been one of the last bastions, if you like, that Gen AI has been basically affecting. And what we're seeing at Audiomob is we're able to generate a lot of audio creatives in a matter of seconds. And I think that's a difference between a lot of other formats where it can take maybe like 20 minutes for you to compile a video and then make it into different personalized content. With audio, we're able to do that in seconds. And to touch on what Jacky and what Kate has said, we're able to create an instant feedback loop. So we're able to create loads of different audio ads that are basically customized to the user based on their location, based on what they're doing in the game, based on their phone language. And then we're able to then create these different custom creatives and then also feed back to our clients how exactly the user is interacting with that particular ad. And I think that's what is really important for our clients, is that you're able to get that almost instantaneous feedback loop. You're not wasting a lot of money where you can spend millions of dollars, doing a campaign for like 2 months without knowing actually until the end how the campaign is performing. We're able to tell you, oh, this creative isn't resonating, or in this area, we're not seeing a lot of client engagement, and then optimize.
The point here is the Gen AI not will change the advertising ecosystem. The Gen AI changes the advertising ecosystem. This is very interesting to take a point. Kate, PepsiCo is a house of brands, a lot of kind of consumers. What is the big challenge when you're looking for a different consumers, different communities, different platforms, the TikTok, Instagram, audio? What is the big challenge here when you use Gen AI for the optimize all this conversation, but it has a different kind of consumers and content here? What is the big challenge?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. I mean, when Wilfrid talked about the 3 billion gamers, you think about the sheer amount of people that we're trying to reach, and if we want to try and reach them in a meaningful way, we want to deliver a content that's more personalized to them. And we can't think of gamers as a monolith. They're not all the same person. So what's going to speak to them differently? So I think Gen AI gives us the opportunity to be much more personalized in that creative execution, to have different nuances that are going to speak to you differently than it's going to speak to Wilfrid or Jacky, and that I think is so powerful. When we think about the different brands, so compounding, gamers on top of what different beverages or snacks that they might like. Our portfolio of brands is so vast, and they all have very distinct voices, very distinct audiences, very distinct tones. We need to make sure that we're being very true to what that is. And so it offers the opportunity of us being very personalized, being very agile as trends are coming in. We can learn, and the sheer volume of the data analysis that we can take through Gen AI is something that we've never seen before. It's this new unlocked tool in our arsenal to really make us that much more powerful. But then on the flip side of that token, it's how do you make sure that the brand voice and the tone that is coming through is true to the brand and staying consistent with that, what that is. Consistency is so critical for especially a beloved brand of ours like Pepsi or Gatorade or Doritos. Like, we want to make sure that the way that we're speaking about our brand is consistent across the board. And so ensuring that if we're leveraging Gen AI to do that, we want to make sure that that tone, feel, what we're saying, how we're speaking to our audience is not going to offend anyone, is not going to dilute the value of our brand, potentially risk any sort of brand reputational aspects. So those are all things that we have to be very conscious of, very mindful of to do it. And you mentioned the guardrails and governance. I think those are critical tools that as this space evolves, we're going to be very mindful of how we do everything that we're doing in a brand safe and ethical way.
And I think that brings an important point about having a human in the loop right now, because if you think about, let's think about Pepsi and the notion of personalization. You have to be crystal clear about your audience, right? Demographics, all aspects of personalization. And how do you do that and not make sure your brand reputation is still there? The brand associated with one aspect of the Pepsi brand is true to the brand. Copyright infringement, which is a big area as well. I mean, all of these things you think about when you're thinking about the guardrails and how you lean into the risks associated with it. I mean, we have a big legal one going on right now with Getty Images and Stability IO. I think that will play out and set a precedence in terms of copyright. So all of these considerations, I think, are part and parcel of our risk guardrails, but also really leaning into making sure humans in the loop.
We have a point here. Kate talked about brand voice. Yeah. I think brand voice is a very, very valuable for the brand. For example, how I can invest in automatization, for example, but I can lose my brand voice. I need to keep my personality. This is I think it's not easy, this conversation here, okay?
No, I definitely think it's not easy. And I think this is where, as Kate said, like even working with PepsiCo, it goes through approval. We're not talking about AI that's just, you generate and then, no one knows about it. I think there's one internal approval who has control of the models, who has access to the models. I think that's first very important. But then I also think when you're interfacing with a client, to your point, how do you make sure if it's audio, if it's video, whatever it might be, how does it actually resonate and actually follow that brand voice or have that brand identity? And I think that's why working together and having an approval process. So we're talking about speeding up the process, not leaving the AI to basically create whatever it wants to and then just approving it. We're talking about doing multiple iterations and saying back to the client, this is what we've created, this is how it sounds, does this match your brand identity? And then going through a natural approval process of if it doesn't, changing and making edits and then providing it. But if you think about what we were doing before, without generative AI, to Kate's point, you can't do that at scale. You can't do that customization. You'll end up with a campaign that, rather than delivering in a couple of days, is now taking 6 months to basically deliver based on the amount of users you have.
I think this is very important. It's a big challenge, but it's very important because in this moment, we have a lot of algorithms in the middle of the consumer and the brand voice. So we need the control, the history. So this point is very interesting. I want to finish think about the responsibility for another way for the responsibility from the CMO, for example. Now are you talking not just optimization, investments, I'm talking about brand which produce content, this content produce news, verify news, fake news. What is the big responsibility for the leadership marketing in all this movement?
Yeah, and it's broader than just the CMO, right? When you think about it, it's almost like 3 or 4 in a box. You've got your CMO, you've got your risk, your legal, your compliance, you've got your HR thinking about the ways of working and how that changes. You're thinking about all aspects of responsibility. CMO's role is both of those things, right? It's one, how can I unlock the power of Gen AI? How can I make sure I'm doing it in an agile way? And Wilfrid touched on this notion of getting the process approved, making sure those processes are fit for purpose, as well. So the aspect, the overarching aspect of control, of ethics, of responsibility, does not rest solely with the CMO in this regard. It rests with the whole senior leadership team, and the processes have to be in place. The checks and balances have to be in place. And you can use some of these Gen AI tools from a policy perspective to also vet and confirm what you're doing. So I just think we just need to think of it broadly, that the ownership rests across all aspects of the functions in your organization. And Kate, you tell me if I'm wrong there.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think it really is a collaborative approach to ensure that you've got all of your bases covered, to make sure that you're really coming at it at the most holistic view, to make sure that you're safeguarding your organization. Minimizing risk is something that I focus a lot of time on, and so that's a core focus here.
And I'd add just with one other aspect, which we don't regularly think about, maybe the Pepsis do, but reputational risk.
Corporate reputation.
Corporate reputational risk becomes a big thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a very good word for finish our conversation, reputation here, because it's the most important in all this way. Just for finish, when you talk for the present and the future, we will talk about a lot of technologies here, not Gen AI, quantum computing, and a lot of another technologies. How complex will be this conversation in the next future?
Oh, I think that's a great question. I think it's only going to get more and more complicated. I think with the power you have to basically reach so many users and customize it, I think we're going to have to implement something like digital watermarking to make sure people know what is actually being created with Gen AI. And also, I think the other thing we're going to need is probably disclaimers on some of this content, so people are cognizant of the fact that this might not be generated by a human, or this might actually be in the future a human lending their voice to a particular campaign, so an influencer, celebrity, or artist. But I think that does need to be digitally watermarked and also followed with a disclaimer. But I think we're still following and trying to work out that legislation and how exactly we let the consumer know that.
Guys, thank you for this conversation. It's not about the Gen AI or the technology or the tools. It's about the brand voice responsibility, or it's human-produced content for human. The algorithm is just in the middle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.